That message, popping up in the college job board chat, felt like a pebble dropped into the stagnant pond of my winter break. The sender was Audrey Thompson, a senior 2 years ahead of me, pretty well known around campus. A real campus celebrity. I stared at the words, my mind racing with calculations. A full month's work, that's almost 10 grand. For a regular freshman like me, that was an astronomical sum, enough to cover all my next semester's expenses and leave me with plenty of spending money. The temptation was too great. I signed up with hardly any hesitation. The interview was set for a quiet corner in a trendy coffee shop near campus. The next day, I arrived 10 minutes early, found a seat by the window, and felt a knot of nerves in my stomach. While I was lost in thought, the glass door chimed as it opened. I looked up and saw a girl walk in. She wore a simple cream-colored turtleneck sweater under a light brown trench coat. Her long hair was loosely tied back, revealing the graceful curve of her neck. She had a cool, ethereal aura, like a snow lotus on a mountaintop. Her features were incredibly delicate, her skin fair, nose bridge high, and her lips a natural rosy red. She was definitely the kind of drop-dead gorgeous you only read about. The moment she saw me, the corner of her lips curved into a faint smile. But her eyes, how do I put it? It wasn't like she was seeing a freshman for the first time. Instead, there was an indescribable familiarity and scrutiny in her gaze. Ethan, she called out my name precisely, her voice clear and cool, yet pleasant. I quickly stood up. Yeah, that's me. Audrey. She gave a slight nod and sat down opposite me, the hem of her coat sweeping in a clean arc. She ordered an Americano. Then her gaze settled on me as she started asking basic questions. My year, my winter break availability, any special skills, that sort of thing. In between her questions, I secretly studied her. The more I looked, the more she felt strangely familiar. I must have seen her somewhere, but I racked my brain and couldn't place it. A girl with her looks and poise. I shouldn't have forgotten her if we'd met before. She seemed to notice my distraction, and the corner of her mouth curved almost imperceptibly. What's wrong? Is there something on my face? No, I stammered, feeling a blush creep up my neck, waving my hands. It's just, you look really familiar. Maybe I've seen you around campus. Oh, really? Audrey's eyes seemed to brighten slightly when she heard me, and her smile deepened. Maybe we have met before. Sounds like fate. She leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, fingers laced together, supporting her chin. Those beautiful eyes looked directly into mine. So, are you interested in this job? It's $300 a day. The work isn't complicated, mostly helping me process files, organize documents, and occasionally run errands. I'm helping my family with a project right now, and we're really short-staffed. Interested? Of course, I'm interested. I nodded eagerly. $300 a day? Forget organizing documents. I'd move bricks for that. Audrey, I'm really diligent, and I'm great with computers, totally fluent in office programs. Good. She smiled, picked up the Americano the waiter had just brought, and took a small sip. Setting the cup down, she seemed to remember something. Her tone became casual, yet with a hint of intimacy. Oh, right, there's an extra perk I didn't mention in the chat. I blinked. Huh, more perks. $300 a day was already a huge perk. What else could there be? Just then, she suddenly leaned closer. A faint, cool scent drifted over me, her breath barely grazing my ear. Then, in a lowered tone, with a subtle, breathy quality, she whispered, "Work a full month, and I'll spend a night with you." Huh. My brain totally flatlined, like a computer crashing, a complete blank. Spend a night. With me? What did that even mean? Was it a verb or a noun? Or was it that meaning? I whipped my head around, staring at her in disbelief. We were so close I could clearly see her long, thick lashes and the calm, unreadable depths of her eyes. It was as if that bombshell she just dropped was as mundane as asking if I wanted a refill. She had to be kidding, right? Audrey had to be messing with me. A beauty like her, from what I heard, with a great family background too. How could she say something like that to a freshman she'd just met? It didn't fit her persona at all. I let out a couple of dry laughs, tried to ease the weird tension. Hey, Audrey, you're quite the joker. Audrey slowly leaned back in her chair, that half smile still playing on her lips. She neither confirmed nor denied it, just watched me with those eyes that seemed to see right through me, gently stirring her coffee. Whether it's a joke or not, You'll find out if you work a full month, won't you? Her voice was light, tossing the choice back to me. My heart pounded in my chest, my mind a jumbled mess. My rational side screamed that this was absolutely not normal. Good things didn't just fall out of the sky, especially not an angelic senior with that kind of perk. But on the other hand, the $300 a day in cash was like a little hand constantly tickling my heart. 10 grand. For a regular college student, the temptation was enormous. So, made up your mind. She set her coffee spoon down with a delicate clink. Work starts tomorrow, 9 a.m. Report to my place. No, my temporary studio. I'll text you the address. Your place. I picked up on that word, my nerves tightening a bit more. Don't worry, it's a gated community, very secure. And the studio is a separate room, and I won't be the only one there. She seemed to read my apprehension, explaining it casually. It's mainly for convenience. All the files and equipment are there. With her saying all that, holding back now would just make me look guilty. Besides, what if I was overthinking it? Maybe Audrey was just naturally more open, or maybe this was actually some kind of test to see if I was a decent guy. All these thoughts battled in my head, but in the end, my desire for the money, along with my curiosity and hopeful thinking about this mysterious senior, won out. Okay, I'm in. I took a deep breath, like I was making some huge decision. Audrey, I'll be there on time tomorrow. Audrey finally offered a more noticeable smile, a hint of satisfaction in it. Excellent. See you tomorrow. She stood up, her coat hem tracing a clean line, leaving behind a faint, cool scent and adding, remember to eat breakfast. I stumbled out of the coffee shop, feeling dazed. The cold air hit me, clearing my head slightly. Looking at the upscale community address she'd texted me, and recalling our bizarre conversation, it felt like I'd just woken up from a strange dream. Back in my dorm, I mentioned it to Mike Peterson, my best friend and roommate. Of course, I left out the extra perk part, just telling him I'd found a great side job paying $300 a day. Mike's eyes went wide when he heard it. $300 a day? Holy crap. Ethan, you hit the jackpot. What kind of gig pays that much? Hook me up. I was vague, just helping a senior organize some stuff. Her family project needed someone fast, and I guess they only needed one person. Mike slung an arm around my shoulder, winking suggestively. A senior? Is she hot? Haha, you sly dog, you're not. He made a lewd face. My stomach dropped. I quickly pushed him away. Get lost. She's a professional senior. Don't be gross. Mike just chuckled, not pushing it further, and clapped me on the shoulder, saying, Don't forget me when you get rich. In the days that followed, I started my part-time job at Audrey's studio. The workplace was indeed her home, a spacious apartment in a luxury building, but one of the separate studies had been converted into a studio, complete with all the necessary office equipment. The work itself was, as she'd said, not complicated. It mainly involved organizing project files, inputting data, and occasionally helping her send emails or deliver documents. She was incredibly good to me, almost overly considerate. Nearly every lunchtime, she'd naturally ask, What do you want to eat? I'll order delivery. Or she'd take me directly to a nice restaurant near the complex. Her orders were always generous, and she even remembered I didn't eat cilantro, and the pay was always on time. Every afternoon after work, I'd unfailingly receive a $300 Venmo transfer from her. That Venmo transfer of $300 notification sound became the sweetest melody of those days. Everything seemed so normal, so utterly normal that I almost forgot that bizarre interlude during the interview. Her behavior was impeccable. Besides necessary work communication, there was hardly any extra contact or conversation. Occasionally, I couldn't help but steal glances at her. When she worked, her profile was sharp and cool, her nose straight, long lashes lowered. Her focused expression carried an air of aloofness that kept people at a distance. But when she occasionally looked up and our eyes met, she'd offer a faint, yet refreshing smile that felt like a warm breeze. This contrast only confused me more. Audrey was beautiful, accomplished, and from a wealthy family. Excellent guys swarmed around her like crazy. Why had she, out of all people, picked me, a merely decent-looking freshman? One lunchtime, after watching her elegantly wipe her mouth, I finally couldn't hold back. Audrey, can I ask you something? She looked up at me, her eyes clear. It's just, why did you choose me for this job? I carefully phrased my question. There must be plenty of students on campus more capable or more meticulous than me, right? And the pay? It's almost too good. I paused, then added half-jokingly, besides being moderately good-looking and having a six-pack from working out, I don't really have any outstanding qualities. Audrey heard me, gently put down her napkin, propped her elbows on the table, and laced her fingers under her chin. Those beautiful eyes looked directly at me, a hint of playfulness in them. How do you know I wasn't looking for your moderately good looks and six-pack? My heart gave a sudden leap, my cheeks flushing. But then she let out a soft laugh, breaking the sudden tension. Just kidding. Then she stood up, naturally beginning to clear the lunch containers, her profile a little blurry in the afternoon light. I chose you because you were the right fit. That's all. Don't overthink it. That don't overthink it was like a gentle prohibition, stuffing all my unanswered questions back down my throat. I could only suppress my curiosity, continuing with the daily routine of organizing, inputting, and running errands. As the numbers in my Venmo wallet steadily grew, the unease in my heart gradually subsided. Before I knew it, it was December 23rd, and the holiday spirit was growing stronger in the air. The project files in the studio had thinned out considerably, and Audrey spent much less time behind the computer. More often, she'd just be sitting on the bay window, quietly reading a book and gazing outside. That afternoon, after organizing the last file and putting it away, I looked at the sunset outside and, after a moment of hesitation, spoke up. Audrey, the project's almost wrapped up, and the holidays are right around the corner. I was planning to buy my ticket home tomorrow. She looked up from her book, her gaze falling on me, and didn't speak immediately. Is your home far from here? She asked softly, closing the book. Not far, I answered honestly. It's only an hour by high-speed train, very convenient. Oh, she replied, her fingers unconsciously tracing the edge of the book's pages. After a few seconds of silence, she suddenly said, I'm not planning to go home for Christmas this year. I paused. Not going home for Christmas? A girl like her, was she going to be alone in her apartment on Christmas Eve? There are some things back home, so there's not much point in going back, she added faintly, her voice devoid of emotion. But her eyes, watching me, seemed to hold some inexpressible expectation. Then I heard her ask, in a tone she tried to keep casual but with a slight tension at the end, Ethan, why don't I go home with you for Christmas? Time seemed to freeze for a second. I wondered if I was hearing things. Go home with me for Christmas? Audrey? To my place? As what? My boss. Or, that phrase from the interview, spend a night with you, strangely popped into my head, making my ears burn instantly. Wasn't this moving a little too fast? Way beyond normal. Hey, Audrey, this isn't really appropriate, is it? My tongue felt tied. My family lives in a regular small town, nothing fancy, and it's Christmas if you come back with me, my parents. They'll definitely get the wrong idea. She watched my flustered reaction, a faint flicker of amusement in her eyes, quickly masked by her usual composure. Misunderstand what? She tilted her head, her expression as innocent as someone completely naive. I'm just going as a friend to experience Christmas with a regular family. Is that not allowed? She said it so casually, as if it was the most normal request in the world. What are you saying? She stood up, slowly walking towards me, her heels clicking crisply on the floor, each step like a tap on my heart. You're afraid I'll cause you trouble if I come? She stopped just a step away from me, that cool scent enveloping me again. She tilted her head back slightly, looking up at me, her eyes shimmering with a knowing slyness. What are you worried about? Something else. My throat went dry, my heart drumming a frantic rhythm in my chest. The word no circled my lips several times, but I couldn't get it out. Facing her, I always seemed to be at a disadvantage, my logic and common sense retreating under her unconventional attack. Seeing my flushed, speechless face, she seemed to get the answer she wanted, the corner of her lips curving into a beautiful arc. Then it settled, she declared, her tone light and cheerful. Tomorrow, shall we go to the train station together? Or I could just drive us back. I'm a pretty good driver. No, the train is fine. I blurted out. Let her drive me home. The thought alone made my scalp tingle. Okay. She conceded gracefully, turned, and picked up her phone. I'll book the tickets now. Send me your personal details. The whole thing was settled almost playfully. It wasn't until I had the day's pay she'd Venmo'd me in hand, and I stumbled out of the apartment building, that the cold air brought me back to my senses. I was really taking Audrey home with me? Christmas Eve, holiday dinner, our small living room. My parents, my grandma, and her. Oh my God. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I opened our family chat, the Millers, and typed a line, "Mom, Dad, just wanted to let you know this Christmas I might be bringing a friend back home." The message had been sent for less than 3 seconds when my mom's call came through, frantic. "Ethan, what friend? A boy or a girl? Did you get a girlfriend? Tell Mom everything." Listening to Mom's rapid-fire questions on the other end, my palms started to sweat. "It's just a friend, a senior. Yeah, she's my boss for this part-time job." I try to make my voice sound normal. "She's not going home for the holidays, so she just wants to experience our family's Christmas atmosphere." "Boss? Senior?" Mom's voice instantly shot up an octave, filled with unbelievable surprise. "Oh my, a boss, you say? A girl like that? Coming back with you for Christmas? Ethan, don't try to fool me. Is she your girlfriend? Tell me the truth." "She's really not." "Mom, don't jump to conclusions." My scalp tingled. I felt like I was digging myself into a deeper hole. "She's just a friend. She's really nice, just a bit special." "Special? Especially pretty? Especially rich?" Mom honed in on the keywords. "Me? Great." Now it was even harder to explain. I hung up and my phone chimed. It was Audrey. She'd sent a screenshot of the train ticket info. "Train 1234, 10:25 a.m., car 02, 15A, 15B. I stared at the 2 adjacent seat numbers, my heart sinking. She was fast, and first-class train tickets, no less. My own pathetic, slow train economy ticket was no match for her money power. I silently opened a ticket booking app, found my bus ticket for tomorrow afternoon, a 3-hour-plus bumpy ride, and canceled it. The cancellation fee stung, but the thought of getting home early and with Audrey. It was a complicated feeling. "Got it, Audrey. See you at the station tomorrow," I replied. She sent back a simple okay. The next day, I dragged my small suitcase and arrived at the train station half an hour early. In the bustling crowd, my eyes immediately found Audrey. Today, she was wearing a long, oak-colored cashmere coat, a belt cinching her slender waist, and a scarf loosely draped, revealing her gracefully defined jawline. Her long hair flowed smoothly over her shoulders, and she wore sunglasses that covered half her face. Still, her cool, distinguished aura shone brightly in the crowd. A modest but extremely high-quality suitcase rested at her feet. When she saw me, she raised a hand to signal. I hurried over, feeling a little self-conscious. "Audrey, you're here so early." "Just got here." Her voice came muffled through her mask, still clear and cool. Her gaze lingered on my face for 2 seconds, as if trying to discern how well I'd slept. Her scrutiny made me uncomfortable. I instinctively rubbed my nose. "So, shall we head in? It's almost time." She nodded. I instinctively reached out to help her with her suitcase, but she gently fended me off with a hand. "No need, it's light." Our fingertips briefly touched, and the cool, delicate sensation sent a jolt through me, making me retract my hand quickly as if I'd been shocked. She seemed to let out a soft chuckle, then pulled her own suitcase, walking calmly towards the security checkpoint. Watching her elegant back, any romantic notions I might have had were instantly suppressed. The high-speed train sped along, the scenery outside blurring past. The first-class cabin was spacious and quiet. Audrey took off her sunglasses and mask after boarding, revealing her flawless face. She seemed a little tired, leaning back in her seat with her eyes gently closed. Her long lashes were like tiny fans, casting faint shadows beneath them. I sat upright, not daring to stare, pretending to watch the scenery outside. But inside, my heart was pounding furiously. How was I going to introduce her to my parents? Would they ask embarrassing questions? Would Audrey be uncomfortable in our home environment? All sorts of worries kept bubbling up like popping bubbles. "Are you nervous?" Her faint voice suddenly broke through from beside me. I jumped, turning to find her eyes open, quietly watching me. "Huh? And no, not at all," I denied instantly, though my palms were sweating. The corner of her lips curved almost imperceptibly. She didn't press further, closing her eyes again. 40 minutes left. Wake me when we get there. With that, she seemed to genuinely settle in for a short nap. I let out a breath and secretly studied her sleeping face. Quieter now, she had less of her usual cool sharpness, replaced by a softness, like an unguarded porcelain doll. But thinking about her coming home with me, this serene scene felt steeped in an unreal absurdity. What exactly was Audrey up to? The train pulled into the station and people surged out. Stepping outside, the familiar air of my hometown greeted me, carrying winter's characteristic crispness and a faint, distant scent of fireworks. My family lived in the older part of town on the west side, about a 20-minute cab ride. Along the way, Audrey kept looking out the window, seeming curious about the small town, but showing no signs of disdain or impatience. That eased some of my anxiety. The car stopped at the entrance to our neighborhood. I pointed to a residential building nearby. Audrey, this is it. She looked in the direction I pointed, her face impassive, and simply murmured, The elevator slowly ascended. In the small space, it was just the two of us, and the humming of the machinery was unusually clear. I could hear my own, slightly frantic heartbeat. When the number flashed 5, the elevator door opened with a soft ding. Before I could even get my keys out, I heard the sound of a door opening and my mom's enthusiastic voice. Is that Ethan home? Immediately after, I saw my mom, wearing an apron, appear at the doorway with a beaming smile. Then, her gaze skipped over me, landing directly on Audrey behind me. In that instant, my mom's expression was priceless, from anticipation to shock, and then to an utterly unrestrained, barely concealed delight. "It's hello, ma'am," Audrey said, inclining her head slightly, her tone extremely polite. "Oh my, hello. Come in. My mom snapped out of it, quickly stepping aside, but her eyes were glued to Audrey, scanning her up and down, her smile growing wider and wider. Watching my mother's fervent gaze, my scalp tingled. I quickly ushered Audrey inside. My dad was sitting on the couch watching TV and stood up at the sound. When he saw Audrey, he clearly froze for a second, then offered a gentle smile. "You're back? And this is—" "Hello, sir. My name is Audrey Thompson. I'm Ethan's senior from college." Audrey introduced herself smoothly and gracefully. Oh, a senior, you say? Welcome. My dad nodded repeatedly, his eyes also holding undisguised surprise and curiosity. At that moment, the living room was filled with the aroma of roasting meat and a strong sense of holiday cheer. Audrey's presence was like a diamond suddenly dropped into a calm lake, radiant, yet somewhat out of place with its surroundings. My mom enthusiastically waved her sit down, pouring water and offering fruit, all the while muttering, "Ethan, honestly, you never said you were bringing such a beautiful friend. The house isn't even properly prepared." Audrey smiled in response. "You're too kind, ma'am. I apologize for intruding." "No intrusion at all. No intrusion. We're thrilled you could come." My mom grinned from ear to ear, and when Audrey wasn't looking, she shot me a fierce glare, silently mouthing, "You little rascal. I'll deal with you later." Me? I knew that in my mom's mind, Audrey's girlfriend status was probably 80% confirmed. Just then, my grandma came out of her room, leaning on her cane. The old lady was nearly 80, and her eyesight wasn't great. She squinted at Audrey for a while, then suddenly grabbed my hand and whispered, "Ethan, this girl. Is she your sweetheart? She's so pretty and lively." Me? "Grandma, you're really my grandma. Could you say that a little quieter?" My toes curled in embarrassment, and I snuck a glance at Audrey. But she acted as if she hadn't heard a thing, gracefully taking a sip from her glass, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. It's over, I thought in despair. This holiday season was definitely not going to be peaceful. For the next while, I felt like I'd become invisible. My mom and grandma swarmed Audrey, asking her all sorts of questions, as if they wanted to know her entire family history. Audrey, however, handled it all impeccably, answering everything without giving away too much. She simply said she was from the city, that her parents were busy with their business, and that she wasn't going home for the holidays because her project wasn't finished, and she wanted to experience something new. Her tone was calm, her demeanor poised, and her inherent refined elegance made people unconsciously trust her. My mom nodded repeatedly, her gaze on Audrey growing more and more satisfied, as if she were looking at a rare treasure. While Audrey was in the restroom, my mom dragged me into the kitchen, lowering her voice, barely containing her excitement. So, tell Mom the truth. This Miss Thompson, is she really your boss? You two aren't seeing each other, are you? Seriously, no, I said, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Mom, she just saw I was a hard worker, and she genuinely wasn't going home for the holidays, so. Oh, please. My mom didn't believe me at all. A privileged girl like her, beautiful as an angel, is she really short on people to spend Christmas with? I think she's totally here for you. You sly dog, you really pulled off something big without a word. Me? I felt like Mom and I were on completely different wavelengths. After dinner, the living room was filled with a subtle sense of saturation. Mom and Grandma's enthusiasm was almost enough to blow the roof off. Audrey maintained her polite smile, but I could tell her back was a bit stiff. Mom, Grandma, I'm going to take Audrey for a walk to digest, I said, standing up, trying to rescue her from the excessive attention. Yes, go for a walk. Mom immediately agreed, her eyes darting between Audrey and me. Ethan, take Audrey to the Riverside Park. They've hung up all the lights there. It's beautiful. Audrey offered a faint smile and stood up. Okay, thank you, Ethan. The early winter night was chilly, our breaths misting in the air. The streets of the old town were narrow, streetlights glowed dim yellow, and occasionally children ran past, chasing each other with laughter, punctuated by the faint pops of firecrackers. We walked side by side, silent for a while, only our footsteps echoing on the quiet street. Her hands were tucked in her coat pockets, her gaze slowly sweeping over the roadside general stores, the food carts emitting savory aromas, and the old residential buildings with potted plants on their windowsills. In her eyes, there was a strange scrutiny, as if revisiting a familiar place, yet with a hint of unfamiliar detachment. It hasn't changed much here, she suddenly said, her voice unusually clear in the cold air. Huh, have you been here before, Audrey? I was a little surprised. This small town wasn't a tourist destination. Outsiders rarely came. She paused, then gently shook her head. No, I just feel like it's similar to the small towns I've imagined. The explanation was reasonable, but I couldn't shake the feeling that her tone, just now, wasn't entirely based on imagination. We reached the river, and sure enough, as Mom had said, a long string of red lanterns hung along the bank, their reflections dancing on the dark water, shimmering into warm patches of light with the breeze. The scenery wasn't breathtaking, but it had a simple, festive atmosphere. Audrey stopped under one of the lanterns, looking up. Her profile was bathed in a soft, warm red glow, her long lashes lowered, obscuring her gaze. It's really quiet here, she said softly. Yeah, not as lively as the big city, I responded. She turned to look at me, the corner of her lips curving slightly. Sometimes quiet is good. We walked along the river for about 15 minutes. She didn't say much, mostly just observing and listening. It wasn't until the chill deepened that we started heading back. When we got back to my building, Mom was already waiting at the 5th floor door, her face brimming with a knowing smile. Ethan, your dad cleaned up the 6th floor, and all the bedding is fresh. You can stay upstairs with Miss Thompson. It'll be quieter. My scalp tingled. Mom, that's not appropriate. What's not appropriate? Mom shot me a glare, then turned to Audrey, instantly switching to her sweet mode. Audrey, dear, our home isn't much. Don't mind it. The apartment upstairs is a bit more spacious. We'll have Ethan stay in the guest room, like your bodyguard. Audrey's eyes flickered from my mom's overly eager face to my stiff form, and the corner of her lips curved almost imperceptibly. Thank you for the arrangement, ma'am. I apologize for the trouble. No trouble at all. No trouble. Mom beamed, practically pushing us towards the stairs. Go on up and see. If you need anything, just tell Ethan or come downstairs. Well, now there was no room to refuse. I led Audrey into the elevator and up to the 6th floor. Opening the door, a clean scent of a place long uninhabited but recently tidied drifted out. The layout was the same as our apartment downstairs, but the decor was distinctly different, more modern, though the furniture was a bit old, bearing the marks of previous occupants. This way, Audrey, I said, pushing open the guest bedroom door. You can have this room. I'll be next door. Audrey nodded and walked in with her suitcase. I headed towards the smaller room opposite the master bedroom, intending to settle myself there. I just set down my backpack when I heard Audrey's voice from the guest room, with a subtle tremor. "Ethan, what's up, Audrey?" I quickly went over. Audrey was standing by the guest room's nightstand, her gaze fixed on a slightly old wooden photo frame. The photo showed a young me, grinning from ear to ear, a Power Rangers morpher in my hand, a front tooth missing. She extended a slender finger, gently tapped the photo, then looked up at me, a hint of curious amusement in her eyes. "This is you." My face burned. I scratched my head. Yeah, that's me as a kid. Pretty dorky, right?" Her gaze didn't leave the photo. Instead, it slid from the nightstand to the glass display cabinet against the wall. Inside, a row of Power Rangers action figures stood neatly, from the original Red Ranger to the latest White Ranger, all in different forms. Though some were slightly faded, they were remarkably well-preserved. "These," she tilted her head slightly, her long hair falling to her shoulder, her voice devoid of emotion, "are all yours." My heart sank. Damn, she saw them. This collection was my most treasured inheritance from childhood, and a bit of a sore spot for me. Especially that limited edition special Red Ranger figure. My face fell hot. I mumbled, I was a kid, didn't know any better. I really love them. So I saved up and bought a few. Saved up? Audrey turned, leaning her back against the nightstand, hands braced on the edge of the surface, watching me with a calm, amused expression. Her eyes were clear, yet held a piercing insight. I think that special Red Ranger was a convention exclusive back then, wasn't it? It wasn't cheap. With your childhood allowance. Was it enough? My breath hitched. She knew even that? That detail was far beyond normal knowledge. And no, it wasn't enough, I admitted, lowering my head, avoiding her too bright gaze, a bit embarrassed. I was too young back then, didn't know any better. To buy it. I did something pretty messed up. Oh, Audrey's voice lifted slightly, a hint of encouragement for me to continue. Under the gaze of her eyes that seemed to see into my soul, I felt a shiver of dread. Those embarrassing childhood memories, long buried by time, seemed to have nowhere to hide. I scratched the back of my neck, avoiding her eyes, my voice unconsciously dropping. There was an older girl, a few years older than me, who used to live on this floor. She always looked out for me. I wanted that special Red Ranger, but I didn't have enough money, so I lied and told her the school needed some weird materials fee. As the words left my mouth, my face burned. Even after all these years, recalling it still made me feel humiliated. The room was silent for a few seconds, only the faint sound of wind from outside. The expected contempt or surprise didn't come. I heard a very soft chuckle, almost like a figment of my imagination. Cautiously, I looked up. Audrey was still leaning against the nightstand, her hands braced behind her, her body tilted slightly forward. Her beautiful eyes were narrowed, swirling with an incredibly complex light. There was teasing, understanding, and even a hint of nostalgia. Then, I heard her speak in a teasing tone. "Really? But I seem to remember. The reason you told her wasn't about a materials fee, was it?" Boom. It was like a thunderclap had exploded in my mind. I froze instantly, my blood seemingly turning to ice. How? How did she know? No one knew about that incident except me and the girl next door? I was terrified back then. I didn't even dare tell my parents. My eyes wide, I stared at her in disbelief, my lips trembling, but no sound came out. Audrey seemed pleased with my reaction. She slowly straightened up, taking a step closer to me, that familiar cool scent enveloping me once more. She tilted her head slightly, her gaze falling on my pale, shocked face, and the corner of her lips curved into an exquisitely beautiful arc that sent shivers down my spine. Her voice dropped even lower, breathy, each word striking my eardrums with chilling clarity. Didn't you back then hold her hand and earnestly declare, "Big sis, lend me your money for now. When I grow up, I'll marry you. My money will be your money. So right now, your money is my money?" Boom! It was like a thunderclap had exploded in my mind again. I froze in place, my blood seeming to turn to ice. That innocent childhood remark, which I considered ancient history. How could she know it so perfectly? She even mimicked the tone flawlessly. I stared at her in disbelief, at this exquisitely flawless face that now seemed utterly alien. A conjecture, absurd to the extreme, yet subtly fitting all the strange details, coiled around my heart like a vine bursting from the earth. You. My voice was incredibly dry, barely forming coherent syllables. Audrey's lips curved into a wide smile, one of triumph and a strange relief, and her beautiful eyes sparkled with bright, complex light. She nodded gently, then, in a nostalgic tone, said each word slowly. "Ethan, it's been so many years. Isn't it time you paid me back with interest?" She extended a hand, a slender fingertip gently tapping the chest of that special Red Ranger figure in the display cabinet. "This, you see, was my dowry." Audrey's fingertip lightly tapped the cool chest plate of the Red Ranger figure. That word, dowry, was like a stone dropped into a still lake, stirring up a storm in my heart. The floodgates of memory burst open, countless blurry fragments rushing forth, scrambling to piece together a long-forgotten figure. The girl next door, the one who always wore clean dresses, smiled gently, would share candy with me after school, and stood up for me when older kids picked on me. I remembered her being quiet just before her family moved, with emotions in her eyes I couldn't understand at the time. Her face had long since blurred into a soft glow in my memories, but I did recall her last name was Thompson? Thompson. I snapped my head up, staring intently at the stunning face before me, trying to find a trace of my childhood playmate in those elegant, cool features. You're Audrey. My voice was as dry as sandpaper. She retracted her finger from the Red Ranger, crossed her arms, and watched me with an amused composure, the smile in her eyes deepening with a "you finally remembered" tease. "Looks like the little guy who kept shouting he'd marry me when he grew up hasn't completely lost his mind." With the confirmation, I became even more flustered, my face flushing then paling. Embarrassment, shame, shock, and an indescribable tremor all mixed together, leaving me standing there like an idiot. So, it wasn't some kind of love at first sight or a high-paying job that fell out of the sky. All of this, from that message in the job chat, was her meticulously planned. Revenge? Or perhaps a long-awaited reckoning? "So, Audrey, you recognized me from the start?" I found my voice, disbelief lacing my tone. "What else?" Audrey raised an eyebrow. "You think I have so much money, I don't know what to do with it. So, I just randomly pick a freshman for $300 a day, plus a special perk." She deliberately slowed down on special perk, her gaze meaningfully sweeping over me. My ears instantly flared crimson. The scene of her whispering in my ear during the interview flashed back. Then, I thought it was a joke or a trap. Now it was clear. The teasing and familiarity in her voice had been obvious hints all along. Then why? Why didn't you just say something? Why go through all this trouble? I felt a pang of annoyance, like a monkey being led around in circles, completely in the dark. "Just tell you." Audrey chuckled softly, walking past me to look out at the scattered lights by the window. "Where's the fun in that?" She turned, leaning against the window frame, the light outlining her graceful silhouette behind her. "I just wanted to see what that little rascal who dared to trick me out of my dowry had grown up to be, whether he was still so audacious." Her gaze settled on my face, scrutinizing, and incidentally collect a little of the debt that's been outstanding for years. Audrey. I switched to her first name, feeling a bit more natural, though still embarrassed. "What happened as a kid, that was my fault. I apologize. That action figure, I can give it back to you, or pay you its current market value." "Pay me?" Audrey shook her head as if I'd said something ridiculous. "Ethan, do you think I'm short on that kind of money? What I wanted was never the money or that plastic toy." She stopped very close to me, looking up. The height difference meant she had to tilt her head slightly, but her aura completely overshadowed me. "I want an answer," she said, her voice soft, yet every word crystal clear. "Does what that little liar who swore he'd marry me all those years ago still count?" I opened my mouth, but my throat felt as if something was lodged there. No sound came out. "Still count?" A childish jest, spoken without understanding, long forgotten in a corner of my own memory, now brought up so solemnly by the person it concerned. I looked into her eyes, so close to mine, reflecting the tiny lights from the ceiling and my own stunned reflection. There was no joking in them, just a quiet anticipation. How should I answer? Say it was just a kid not knowing any better? But she was clearly not asking in jest. Or say it did count, but there was such a long blank between us. The Audrey of today was both familiar and a stranger, like seeing someone through frosted glass, unable to make her out clearly. One word escaped, then I choked. Audrey waited silently for a few seconds, seeing that I couldn't string together a complete sentence. The tiny flicker of light in her eyes imperceptibly dimmed. Then she let out a soft breath, as if in resignation or perhaps relief. She took a small step back, widening the suffocating distance between us, and her usual faint smile returned to her face. "Never mind," she said, turning to her suitcase, her voice returning to its usual cool composure, devoid of emotion. "It's a bit sudden, bringing this up right after we've reconnected. Let's give it some time. When you've thought it through, then you can give me your answer." I stood frozen, watching her slender back, a mix of emotions churning inside me. I was a little relieved she'd given me time to process, yet also felt a strange disappointment. Audrey." I licked my dry lips, trying to break the awkward silence. "You go ahead and unpack. Mom probably put new toiletries in the bathroom for you. I'll go check on my room." "Okay," she replied softly, without turning around. The next day, I woke to the familiar sound of firecrackers. Though I'd only slept for a couple of hours, my mind was unusually clear. The shock from last night hadn't dissipated after a night of reflection. Instead, it had transformed into a more complex, inexpressible emotion, weighing heavily on my heart. I took a deep breath and pushed open my door. The aroma of food was already drifting up from downstairs, mixed with the sounds of Mom's busy footsteps and the gentle clatter of pots and pans. I reached the guest room door, which was ajar. I hesitated, then gently knocked. "Come in," Audrey's clear voice called from inside. I pushed the door open. She was already dressed, still in her simple yet elegant clothes, standing by the window, watching the occasional firecrackers popping and children chasing each other downstairs. The morning light streamed through the glass, casting a soft glow around her. Her profile was serene. No trace of last night's turbulence was visible. "Morning, Audrey." I greeted her, feeling a bit awkward. She turned to my voice, her face wearing a perfectly composed smile. "Morning, Ethan." She was completely at ease, her tone normal, as if she wasn't the one who had pressed me, dropping a bombshell question the night before. This deliberate normalcy only further confirmed that it hadn't been a dream. "Let's head downstairs for breakfast. Mom should have it ready," I said, stepping aside to let her pass. "Okay." The dining table was indeed unusually lavish. Mom had pulled out all the stops: pancakes, bacon, scrambled eggs, and some fruit, her face beaming as she greeted Audrey. "Audrey, dear, I wasn't sure what you'd like, so I just made a little bit of everything. Please don't be shy. You went to so much trouble, ma'am." "It all looks delicious," Audrey said, smiling as she gracefully sat down. Even Dad, for once, didn't immediately turn to the morning news. Instead, he chatted about everyday things, asking Audrey if she'd slept comfortably. Grandma, meanwhile, held Audrey's hand, chattering about what a pretty girl you are, her affection almost overflowing from her eyes. Throughout breakfast, Audrey handled herself with grace and poise. She deftly fielded all of Mom's overt and subtle probing questions, answering in a way that kept the atmosphere from going stale while offering no hooks for further digging. She completely avoided any mention of last night, as if that conversation had never happened. I sat beside her, silently eating my cereal, feeling an itch of anxiety in my heart. The calmer she was, the more I sensed the turbulent undercurrents beneath that placid surface. She had given me time, but that time wasn't limitless. That question, like a sword of Damocles, would eventually fall. Over the next few days, the holiday spirit intensified. Decorating, preparing Christmas dinner. Audrey integrated herself into all of our family's holiday traditions with a surprising ease that amazed me. She never deliberately took over tasks, but she'd always naturally lend a hand when Mom was busy, pass something over, or quietly learn how to make dumplings, a bit ugly in appearance, but full of heart. She was incredibly patient with my grandma, listening intently to the old woman tell stories she'd repeated countless times, occasionally responding softly, always managing to make Grandma laugh heartily. She even couldn't resist offering pointers when Dad and I awkwardly hung some decorations crookedly, a barely perceptible smile in her voice. A little higher on the left. No, too high, a little lower. She perfectly played the role of a senior who was from the big city, from a privileged background, but approachable and curious and kind towards her freshman friend's family. Even my usually serious dad privately remarked to my mom, "Ethan's friend, she's really good people, no pretense at all." Only I knew what heart-stopping secret lay hidden behind that goodness. On Christmas Eve, the dinner table was piled high with food. The festive holiday special blared from the TV, and outside, fireworks burst in continuous, dazzling displays. Our family gathered around, toasting and exchanging good wishes, the atmosphere lively and warm. Audrey sat beside me, her cheeks faintly flushed from a light fruit drink. In the warm, yellow light, she looked less cool and more gently beautiful. She watched the TV sketch, laughing along with everyone, her eyes bright, as if genuinely immersed in this ordinary, simple happiness. In that moment, watching her profile illuminated by the fireworks, a corner of my heart suddenly softened. Setting aside the childhood entanglement and the present situation, these past few days of being with her had been real and warm. She was no longer the blurry, gentle girl next door from my memory, nor the unapproachable campus celebrity, nor the surprising, mysterious boss from the interview. She was a living, breathing girl who laughed, felt helpless, secretly tried to make dumplings, and startled at the sound of firecrackers. The girl living upstairs in my family's house. "Ethan, what are you spacing out for? Get Audrey some food." Mom's voice pulled me back from my thoughts. I quickly responded, picking up a piece of sweet and sour ribs, one she seemed to have eyed a little longer, and placed it in her bowl. Audrey turned, glanced at me, and a flicker of something seemed to pass through her eyes before quickly dissolving into a smile. "Thanks." "No problem," I murmured back. After dinner, everyone stayed up until midnight. Audrey sat with Grandma, watching the holiday special, occasionally exchanging soft words. I sat on a slightly more distant couch, watching her back. The answer to that question in my heart seemed to be slowly coming into focus. At midnight, the clock chimed, and outside, fireworks reached their peak, almost lighting up the entire night sky. Everyone wished each other Happy New Year. Audrey turned, looking at me, a genuine smile blooming on her lips, more dazzling than any firework outside. "Happy New Year, Ethan." "Happy New Year, Audrey," I replied, looking at her earnest. That Audrey, I said, felt like an invisible barrier had been broken. A barely perceptible flicker of surprise crossed her eyes. Then her smile deepened, spreading like ripples from stone dropped into a lake, gently melting away. The festive warmth and hustle of Christmas Eve hadn't entirely faded, and the days passed in a blur of visiting friends and relatives and lazy relaxation. Late one night, I was deep in sleep when I was suddenly jolted awake by a low rumbling. Not fireworks, but thunder. Winter thunderstorms weren't common in our small town, but they occasionally happened. Immediately after, a blinding flash of lightning tore through the night sky, illuminating the room as if it were midday, followed by a rolling boom of thunder that sounded like it exploded right over the roof. I rubbed my eyes, about to get up and close the window, when I heard a faint, urgent knock at my door. "Ethan, Ethan, are you awake?" It was Audrey's voice from outside, with a subtle tremor. My heart clenched. I immediately got out of bed and opened the door. Outside, Audrey was wearing only a thin, silk slip dress, the hem just past her thighs, revealing her smooth, straight calves and delicate ankles. The soft silk clung to her, outlining her curves. She was barefoot, standing on the cold floor, her arms wrapped around herself, her shoulders slightly hunched. I quickly stepped aside, ushering her in. "Come in, the floor's cold." Another stark white lightning flash cut across the sky, followed by a booming thunderclap that sounded like it would tear the heavens apart. Audrey let out a small gasp, practically leaping into my arms. A fragrant, soft warmth crashed against me, and I instantly froze, not knowing where to put my hands or feet. She was cool to the touch, carrying the fresh scent of a recent shower mixed with a unique sweetness. The silk of her slip dress felt smooth and chilling, but the warmth emanating from her body beneath, it was undeniably clear. I'm scared of thunder, she murmured, her face buried in the crook of my shoulder, her voice trembling with fright, like a startled animal. I stood frozen for 2 seconds before reacting, instinctively patting her back gently to comfort her. It's okay, it's okay. It's just thunder. It'll pass soon. Her body trembled slightly in my arms, her arms wrapped tightly around my waist. Through the thin fabric of her dress, I could feel her rapid heartbeat. Ethan! She looked up, her eyes misty with tears, appearing utterly vulnerable in the occasional flashes of lightning from outside. See, can I sleep in your room tonight? My window faces an open area, and the thunder is just too loud. I'm scared. I looked down at her face, so close to mine, her lips pale from fright and the delicate curve of her collarbone beneath her slender neck. My throat went dry. It was the middle of the night, just the two of us, and she was dressed like that. I'll sleep on the floor, I promised almost immediately, trying to sound completely virtuous. You can have a bed. She didn't speak, just looked at me with those watery eyes, her long lashes trembling softly. Another roar of thunder. She shivered, hugging me tighter, her soft body pressing even closer. She murmured softly, agreeing to my suggestion. I breathed a sigh of relief. Just as I was about to go find some bedding to sleep on the floor, she gently tugged my wrist. Don't sleep on the floor, she whispered, her voice slightly nasal, her gaze darting towards my bed. This bed, it's pretty big. We can share it. Me? Share it? Audrey, do you even know what you're saying? I felt like smoke was about to pour from my ears, blood rushing to my face with a hum. And no, that's not right. That's totally inappropriate. I waved my hands frantically, my tongue tying itself in knots again. But Audrey seemed to have made up her mind. She pulled my wrist and led me towards the bed. Her strength was surprisingly significant. Or perhaps I simply hadn't dared to struggle. I don't mind, so what are you scared of? She glanced at me, the corner of her eye still a little damp, but there was a different nuance in her tone. Or are you saying, you're afraid you won't be able to control yourself? Those words were pure kindling. My neck flushed crimson. I'm not. I didn't. Audrey, don't say things like that. She let out a soft huff, pushed me towards the bed without question, then pulled back the covers and slipped in herself, revealing only her fair face and dark hair fanned across the pillow. Then she patted the empty space beside her, her eyes fixed on me. Come on, it's cold on the floor. Don't worry, I trust you. I looked at the small lump under the covers, and her eyes, unusually bright in the darkness. I felt like I was dreaming, a ridiculous and suggestive dream. I struggled for a few seconds, my rationality bouncing between boundaries and not leaving a scared friend alone with thunder. In the end, the latter, along with a certain unspoken thrill deep inside me, won out. I stiffly walked to the other side of the bed, carefully lifted a corner of the blanket, and lay down as far from her as possible. The mattress dipped slightly under my weight. Behind me, I heard her slight movements and the increasingly clear, lovely, cool scent of her. My heart hammered in my chest, so loud I wondered if she could hear it. The thunder continued, but it didn't seem as frightening anymore. The room was quiet, with only the sound of our breathing. Suddenly, a cool, soft hand gently rested on my side. My whole body tensed. Immediately after, a warm, soft body pressed against me, nestling tightly against my chest. Her arm wrapped around my waist, her cheek gently resting against my back. Through the thin fabric of her sleep dress, I could distinctly feel the curve and warmth of her body. This way, I'm not so scared anymore. I absolutely dared not move, every muscle in my body tensed tight like a rock. Audrey snuggled deeper into my embrace, finding a comfortable spot, her head resting just below my chin. Good night, Ethan, she murmured, closing her eyes, her voice laced with satisfied languor. Fragrant, soft Audrey, curled up in my arms like a cat that had found its home. 12 inevitable the next evening. The moon was bright and the stars were out. There was no sign of thunder. I had just finished getting ready for bed and lay down in my own room, ready to relax, when that familiar, soft knock came again. "Ethan." Audrey's voice came through the door, with a hint of feigned fragility. I think I'm still a little scared." "Me?" "Audrey, could your excuse be any more obvious?" I took a deep breath and got out of bed to open the door. Outside, Audrey was once again in her silk slip dress, the hem swaying, outlining her enticing curves. Her arms were crossed, her eyes blinking at me, her face a mix of innocence and righteous expectation. "It doesn't seem to be thundering tonight," I try to argue, pointing out the obvious. "But what if it does in the middle of the night?" she insisted, her body giving a theatrical shiver. The weather forecast mentioned possible thunderstorms. I glanced up at the bright moonlight outside, silently thinking that weather forecast must be making things up. Besides, she leaned a step closer, looking up at me, her breath like a soft whisper. "I'm cold sleeping alone." That last cold had a hint of a whimper in its tail, like a feather lightly tickling my heart. Looking at her face so close, inhaling her familiar cool scent, the sensation of her warm, soft body in my arm from last night instantly revived, and my defenses began to crumble. "Okay, come in then." Audrey's face lit up at my words. She then smoothly slipped into the room, walking straight to my bed, pulling back the covers and sliding in. Her movements were fluid and natural, as if this were her rightful territory. Once settled, she patted the empty space beside her, her eyes signaling me, "Hurry up." I sighed in resignation, closed the door, and walked to the bed. After last night, some invisible barrier seemed to have broken. I lay flat, feeling the warmth and scent emanating from beside me. She was also lying flat, but our arms inevitably brushed. The slippery feel of the silk against her cool, delicate skin was a sharp contrast, like an electric current. The room was quiet, with only the sound of our breathing. "Ethan," she suddenly whispered. Nothing, just calling your name." Her voice held a hint of laughter. Then a cool, small hand secretly slipped into my palm, her fingers lacing with mine. My heart skipped a beat, then began to pound even more fiercely. I didn't pull away. Instead, I gently tightened my fingers, holding her hand. Her hand was soft, her fingertips cool, and as I enveloped in my palm, it gradually warmed to my temperature. We lay there quietly, neither of us speaking again, but the ambient tension grew thicker and thicker. The third day, the fourth day, Audrey seemed to have adopted my room as her permanent bedroom, reporting in every night. Her excuses evolved from scared of thunder to got used to sleeping together, and eventually, she didn't even bother with excuses, just walked in with her pillow. She seemed to really enjoy this intimacy, always finding a comfortable spot in my arms before falling asleep, like a small cat. Sometimes she'd curl against my chest with her back to me, other times face me, her breath softly caressing my neck. As for me, from initial stiffness and awkwardness, I gradually got used to it and even started to crave her warmth. Falling asleep every night with her soft, fragrant body in my arms, and watching her peaceful sleeping face in the morning when she was still groggy, became a sweet and agonizing torture. I'm a normal guy, young and full of vigor, with such a breathtaking beauty, clearly with ulterior motives towards me. Lying in my arms, to say I had no romantic thoughts would be pure self-deception. But I kept myself in check, not daring to cross any lines. Until the night of January 17th. Perhaps it was the relaxed holiday atmosphere, or maybe the continuous nights of sharing a bed had brought certain emotions to a breaking point. That night, she seemed particularly restless. First, she pretended to roll over, her leg accidentally draping over my waist. Then, as my body stiffened slightly, her hand unconsciously traced circles on my chest. In the darkness, her breath feathered against my ear. "Ethan, are you asleep?" My Adam's apple bobbed. My voice was tight. "Not yet." "Oh," she responded, and far from backing off, she escalated. Her whole body pressed closer, her cheek rubbing gently against my shoulder, her hair brushing my skin. "Your abs, they really do feel hard," she mumbled softly, her cool fingertips directly touching the skin on my lower back. I sharply inhaled, every muscle in my body instantly tensing like steel. She seemed to sense my change. Her fingertips paused, but didn't withdraw. moving again, then again. Audrey Thompson. I hissed her full name, my voice hoarse, a final warning. But she seemed emboldened, not scared at all. Instead, she lifted her head, meeting my gaze precisely in the darkness. In the faint light from the window, I could see her astonishingly bright eyes, sparkling with boldness, slyness, and a hint of expectation. What? Her voice held a laugh, her breath brushing my lips. You're allowed to trick me out of my dowry when you were little, but I'm not allowed to collect some interest now. Those words completely ignited the long-suppressed fire within me. I couldn't hold back any longer. I lowered my head and captured her smiling lips. Her breath hitched slightly, then she willingly tilted her head back, responding, her arms circling my neck. The kiss was filled with long-held desire and a hint of defiant punishment. After who knew how long, I reluctantly pulled away, resting my forehead against hers, my voice impossibly hoarse. Is this okay, Audrey? In the darkness, her cheeks were burning, her eyes glistening with a tiny reflection of light, like wet obsidian. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she curled a finger and lightly, playfully, tapped my face with a hint of chiding. What do you think? Her voice was soft and gentle, the last syllable lingering, like a small hook. Little liar. Her little liar was like the final permission, completely shattering all my rationality. I kissed her again. Everything fell into place, inevitably.